Welcome, everybody, to our latest episode of The Chart, where we discuss all things personal finance. I'm your host, John Alordi, and with me, as always, is Jeff Myers.
Hey, John.
Hey, Jeff. So today, our topic is not necessarily a specific sort of financial instrument. It's more kind of a big guy in the space. We're talking about Dave Ramsey. He's got, I think, a radio show.
Yep.
Books. He's got a whole kind of personal finance empire where he talks kind of he talks personal finance, he talks about debt, doing it as a Christian. You know, if you are at all curious about personal finance, you're going to run into Dave Ramsey. So I think we're just going to kind of talk about what he advocates, what our thoughts are about it, and whether or not you should follow his advice.
Yeah.
So, Jeff, starting off broadly, what's your opinion on Dave Ramsey? His whole thing is zero debt, if I'm right, or debt freedom.
Yeah, exactly. So the biggest thing with Dave Ramsey is his claim to fame is helping people get out of debt, right? So people call into his radio show, his video show, and they ask for help to get out of debt. And usually it's people who are younger, who kind of made poor decisions with managing their own money, gotten a lot of credit card debts, gotten over their heads in a car loan, that type of situation, and they just need someone to kind of give them direction to getting out of debt. And on that page, like, absolutely, it's great. Like, people should not be crippled by their debt. You can definitely argue that the type of debt these people are kind of weighed down by is the bad debt that we've talked about a few times, and they just need help getting out of it. So absolutely, I think what he's doing is awesome. I think helping people get out of debt is empowering to those people. It helps them to get their financial life in order and on track. And from that perspective, it's great.
Right. And I think his big kind of catchphrase is the debt snowball, right? So his idea is that you pay off the little debts first.
Yep.
And with this, you build momentum, you start to understand what it's like to pay off debt. And eventually, the payments that you're making to the little one roll over. So now you snowball down, right? Like that's
You
the metaphor.
accumulate, yeah,
You accumulate this
more.
kind of monthly ability to pay off debts, right?
Uh,
And it's very psychological, I would say. Is the debt snowball is more psychological, where a lot of people I think would argue or suggest you pay things off based on interest rates.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, think about, you have 10 different pieces of debt, credit cards, loans, whatever. You pay one off, there's a little victory there, right? So
Right.
you get an emotional response that helps you keep going down, because this process of paying off debt is not something that you can do quickly or easily. I mean, you don't just walk into the bar one day and someone hands you $100,000 and you say, "Hey, I can pay off all my debt now."
Right.
It's a time consuming. You have to be disciplined, stay motivated, keep on track of things in order to get through the process and really become financially free, pay off all your debt, all that stuff.
Yeah, it's there's that like dieting advice where it's like, well, what's the best diet? It's the one that works. It's the one that you stick
Yeah.
to,
The
right? It's
one
the
that
one
you
you
stick to,
do. Yeah,
exactly.
the one you can do. So I think it's very similar to that. Is like, well, what's the best way to pay off the debt? Well, it's the one that allows you to pay off the debt, right? It's the one you can stick to
Yep.
because it's going to take years. It's going to take time.
Yep.
You may not want to optimize it just based on your personality, or you want to optimize it based on your personality, not based on what's going to save you the most money. Because if you don't end up doing it, you don't get out of debt, right? It doesn't
Yeah,
accomplish its goal.
exactly. And I think one of the important pieces too is, like, you can't go through life assuming someone's just going to hand you money to pay off this debt either.
Right.
You have to kind of take control of that. And I think that's something that he talks about a lot, is taking control of your life. And a
Right.
lot of times, he on his radio show, I love this part, but he can often be kind of mean or kind of hard to people, and he gives them a good kick in the pants and says,
Yeah.
"Hey, you made a mistake. That was not a good idea. You should not have gotten that $50,000 car loan. Like, what you need to do right now is go sell that car, get out of the debt, and pay it off as quickly as you can." And sometimes people need that. It's that tough love. They
Yeah.
need that to take a step in the right direction, because people have never challenged them in the past, because finances are personal and it's hard to challenge someone else on their own financial situation. And so to have him do that to everyone, I
hmm
think that's a great service.
Yeah. I think overall, I like Dave Ramsey. I think he's provides valuable information. I do think, and this is where we can kind of transition more to like criticisms or kind of some nuances to his approach, is that I would argue Dave Ramsey is a great like starting point. He's
Yes.
really good if you're in debt or if you don't know too much about personal finance. He can really help you kind of get started and get a good understanding of it.
Yeah.
But I think he advocates for what I think I'm going to call the zero debt life. He's very debt averse, right?
Right.
He doesn't want you taking out loans for anything. I don't even think he doesn't even want you to take a credit card out, right? Like I don't.
Oh, no, I think one of the first things he tells people is to literally cut up their credit cards. He
Right,
says, "I want you to get them out, cut them up, or put them in a cup of water and put it in the freezer. Like don't ever touch those or use them again."
right. And that's great advice if you're super deep in debt, you don't know what you're doing, and you're learning the ropes of how to deal with this.
Right.
But if you're, a little more advanced, if you kind of know personal finance a little bit, I think that's a step too far. I think you can
Yep.
make those things work if you have the right self-control and enough practice. Oh, sorry, you're about to say something?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna agree with that because it's especially important for people if you don't have that self-control, then you definitely shouldn't have a credit card. But there are effective ways, we talked about this in the past, there are effective ways to use your credit card. You can use it to your advantage, and it doesn't have to be a burden in your life, but it does take some emotional, some spiritual maturity as well to be able
Yeah.
to use things like that and car loans, mortgages, that kind of stuff in general.
Right. And then he's even, speaking of mortgages, I think he even advocates for not getting a mortgage and paying straight cash for a house, which is kind of nuts if you think about it. Or not nuts,
It's
but
it's nuts.
okay, it's nuts. All right.
Yeah, that's
To me,
definitely nuts.
it's outside the norm, right? He would much rather you spent 20 years saving and then bought a house versus getting a loan and then paying off a house as you go.
Yeah, and we talked about this with mortgages as well. I think that mortgage absolutely can be a good debt that is helpful for you. One of his baby steps is actually paying off your home early. I had a former colleague of mine who did that and actually regretted the decision because, he saved for a really long time and he used all of that excess cash to pay off his home. And it increased his monthly cash flow. It helped him in that sense, but he regretted not actually investing that money and just continuing to pay off his mortgage over time because his quality of life did not improve when he removed that mortgage payment. For some
Right.
people, it might absolutely improve your quality of life. And I think that's an important distinction to make is if you're going to be able to improve your quality of life, your family's quality of life, the ability that you have to give and save and provide for others, then you should absolutely get out of debt as quickly as possible. But if it's not, and it's going to be a detriment, then like especially as it relates to paying off your home early, it's probably not worth the effort.
Right. I mean, I think that's been an overarching theme of our series so far is that a lot of it depends on where you're at, what's important to you, and
Right.
kind of all that stuff. And that's, to me, that would be the big flaw with Dave Ramsey is that he takes this very kind of concrete approach and
Mm-hmm.
applies it to everybody.
Yeah.
Uh, and look, it works if you're in debt. It works as a starting point. If you just followed everything Dave Ramsey said, you would be financially fine. I think, as far as I
Yeah.
can tell, you'll be okay. You'll be in a good spot, which is for most people what they just need to get to and
Yep.
where they should be. But I don't. It doesn't. It feels like you're going from a negative number to zero. It doesn't take you from zero to a positive number, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I mean, you can apply that across so many things, but I think that's a really important distinction to make because the majority of people are in debt. We
Right.
talked about this earlier with student loans. The average student loans for someone coming out of college is $36,000, something like that. Like the average person has a negative net worth. And so if the average person is in the negative zone, getting from negative to zero is going to apply to so many people. And so he's really doing a service for so many people on that front. And he's got the positive wealth building side, he's
Hmm.
got some co-hosts that talk about that stuff. But for him, like his bread and butter is getting people out of debt. And if
Right.
that's your bread and butter, that is amazing, right? Because so many
Right.
people need to get out of debt because our our current generation, The way that the country works currently, it encourages more and more spending, more and more consumerism, more and more debt. And
Yeah.
if that's going to take people in the negative zone, then him being the person to help them get out of the negative is going to be, it's huge. And I
Right.
advocate for that all day.
Right. And I think, it's that is the criticism, right? That he doesn't help you thrive. But the truth is, going from being in debt to having no debt is a game changer, right? That's freedom.
Absolutely.
You can now do whatever you want. You can change careers much easier. You no longer have this huge responsibility and commitment
Hmm.
hanging over your head. Like
Right.
it's no small feat to go from no debt to go from being in debt to no debt. Like that, to me, that's the unfair criticism of Dave Ramsey, is that they'll just brush that off, like, oh,
Yeah.
he just helps people get out of debt. That's huge. Okay.
It's huge.
So many people are in debt, and being in debt is, I mean, like, you can say it's slavery in a lot of
It
ways.
is.
You're
Absolutely.
you're hooked up to it. You are working for someone else in a lot of ways. So it's freedom, and I think Dave Ramsey is great in that regard. I do think, the other side of things aren't super fleshed out, but you know what? We all have a different role to play, and I think his role in helping
Yeah.
people get out of debt and reach freedom and live the life they need to live, and allowing them to kind of pursue, like his big thing. He's big on like charity and being a good
Hmm.
Christian and all that kind of stuff as well. And it's so much easier to do that if you don't have debt,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. I think one thing that would be even helpful to think about is like, so when did you start listening to Dave Ramsey or even get interested in him?
I've always heard of Dave Ramsey. I never actually
Yeah.
listened to Dave Ramsey a ton. I read his book Total Money Makeover about a year or two ago.
Okay.
I just have always known of him, and I knew his thing was zero debt, which is always kind of my thing as well. My dad was a fan, and he kind of just I got it through my dad, right? So
So you learned early on, right,
yes.
from through your dad, right? So my wife Katie and I, we found Dave Ramsey very early in our marriage.
Hmm.
And that was something that we listened to his radio show. We both read the book, like we got on board. And I think in your early career, early stages of life, it is absolutely critical to have this understanding because
Yes.
he teaches you about having an emergency fund, paying off debt, building a savings, and then going from there. And
Yeah.
if that's how you start your life, your career, your marriage, whatever, that is an amazing foundation to have. And then you
Yes.
can go somewhere else to find your information for the next stage of life.
Right.
And I think that if you can't think about one size fits all in this situation, but
Hmm.
if you're encouraging people early in their life to approach this, I actually remember, I literally just remembered this at my church when I was in high school. My high school class went through Financial Peace University. So the high school teacher got it, and we went through the videos and we did the process together. That was before, like, I had a part-time job, but like I didn't have debt. I didn't
Right.
know really what debt was. But going through that process at such a young age really helped kind of solidify that foundation. And then going through it again with Katie when we were married, like that's kind of, it's a building block, right? You
Yeah.
have to start somewhere. And if your first step is going from negative to zero, it's a phenomenal first step.
Right. I think you said it best. It's foundational, right? And different people realize they need to get to that foundational step of personal finance at different points in their life.
Hmm.
Obviously, earlier is better, right?
Yep.
Great. If you understand Dave Ramsey at 18, you're doing great. But if you just understand him at 40, that's still an improvement. All right, you
Yeah.
still got
Right.
a lot of life left to live. So to me, he's your first step in like financial freedom or financial or personal responsibility, and just kind of finding out how to have a solid financial personal, like, it's just part of your life. And I think he's
Yep.
great for the foundation. He will set you up beautifully to build off of. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Great.
Absolutely. 100% agree with that.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add about Dave Ramsey, or anything else? Any hot takes on Dave Ramsey?
Hot takes.
Yeah.
I don't know him personally. No.
No, yeah, me neither. No, I think in general we're pretty positive on Dave Ramsey. He's a little stiff on some things, but you know what? That if you just follow Dave Ramsey for the rest of your life, you'd probably be okay.
Yeah, there's got to be some areas where you have a hard line like that, and
Yeah.
and that's okay. It works for a good majority of people, and that's okay.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, Jeff, thank you for joining me.
Thanks, John.
And all of you watchers and listeners out there, thank you for joining us for this talk. Again, I should have said this at the beginning of the video, but here we are at the end. Please like and subscribe, and share the video if you think you know someone who would enjoy it or wouldn't enjoy it. Just share the video. Thanks for joining us, and have a good one.